India has implemented a new citizenship law just weeks before a general election. The bill was first passed in 2019 and provides a fast track to naturalization for minority religious groups from neighboring Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. However, it does not include Muslims, who make up the majority of the population of the three countries. The Citizenship Amendment Act had lain dormant since deadly protests in 2019, only to be enacted now as the country heads to the polls. DW's Manira Chaudhry reports.
It's Ramadan and the streets of Shaheen Bagh in Delhi are buzzing with festivities after a long day of fasting. In 2019, the Muslim majority area became a hotspot in the protest against the Citizenship Amendment Act, or CAA for short. We meet Asif Mushtaba, who a little over 4 years ago spent days and nights at this exact spot, leading one of the biggest protest movements independent India had seen.
Someone placed a broken bench there, and that was the place where we stood and gave speeches.
In 2019, CAA made changes to an existing law to grant fast-track citizenship to undocumented migrants from 6 religious groups, including Hindus and Christians, from 3 Muslim-majority neighboring countries: Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. Muslim migrants were not included in the provision.
Any religiously persecuted community coming to India for a shelter should get citizenship, and I support that. But when you say everyone will get citizenship except Muslims, that's the point where I have reservation too. So CA is totally Islamophobic, it is totally criminal.
Critics call CAA India's first religion-based citizenship test and the initial step of a larger agenda. There are fears that it could potentially be used to expel Muslims identified as illegal immigrants.
It is selectively targeting Muslims. And that's why it's against the ethos of the secular country that India that we live in.
Is there a hidden agenda? We meet Nalin Kohli, a BJP leader and Supreme Court advocate. According to Kohli, the CAA is not anti-Muslim, but is simply about helping minority non-Muslims in the region.
For a Muslim who wants to be an immigrant or wishes to seek citizenship here, to say that I should be fast-tracked when he's coming from a Muslim majority country and has the option to go to 50 other countries, which a Hindu doesn't have, a Sikh doesn't have, is discriminatory then to the entire cause and purpose.
But critics of the act maintain the law is discriminatory and that using religion as a basis for citizenship violates a fundamental right to equality. We spoke to Kushank Sindhu, an advocate specializing in constitutional law. He told us that Citizenship Amendment Act still faces a number of legal challenges.
The question is whether or not the amendments actually pass constitutional muster. And there are already petitions which have been listed before the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court will decide on the constitutionality of this act.
Back in Shaheen Bagh, Asif is worried. He is concerned that the government might soon merge the CAA with the planned National Register of Citizens, or NRC for short. The proposed register would make a list of all legal citizens in India and could tie citizenship rights even more closely to religion.
It's very likely possible that the government will implement NRC because their hate towards Muslims, it transcends beyond anything that you can imagine.
For now, Asif is clinging to the hope that India's highest court will strike down any law linking citizenship to religion. To date, over 200 petitions challenging the CAA have been filed.
Let's dig deeper into this now with Omer Ahmad. He's a political analyst and journalist and joins us from Delhi. Welcome to the program. Omer, help us understand this. Why has Prime Minister Modi's government chose to implement this highly controversial law?
That's a question that actually only they can answer. But to be blunt, like a lot of center-right or authoritarian parties in politics, a lot of dog whistling happens just before elections because that helps polarize the votes and it benefits particular parties. This happens in countries around the world, and Modi's BJP is particularly good at throwing some polarizing content just before elections because it benefits them.
How would you describe the mood among India's Muslim population right now, especially given the decision to implement this law?
Well, I mean, it's a little hard to talk about the Muslim population as a whole. You have to think of it that this is approximately 200 million people across the breadth of this country. But on the whole, what Indian Muslims are wanting is to avoid anything that that paints them as a target. And this particular law is seen as something, especially if it's tied to a national national certification of registration, that it will particularly pick and choose out Muslims as people who can be targeted. And that fear is something that, I mean, for any minority anywhere in the world, and you see this, I mean, when you saw this in the US with Black Lives Matter, when you give extra power to coercive political apparatus, particularly the police, to check people, to stop and frisk, all of this always impacts repressed minorities the most.
Sure.
So a very strong law like this, which can be used broadly, is a defer, particularly for poorer Muslims who would have little recourse.
Now, we heard in the report, we heard the argument in the report that the new law is not meant to be Islamophobic, that it would simply be helping minority non-Muslims in the region. Can you make sense of that argument?
Well, there's two parts of it. One is that Muslims, by the way, Jews aren't also included in that, but there's very few Jews applying for citizenship in India. One, that Muslims are not allowed to be fast-tracked. But the other question is, you have three countries what this law applies to, and that's Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. India's actually hosted far larger population of refugees from Sri Lanka, poor Tamil, and from Tibet, the Tibetans, from Myanmar. The Rohingya refugees, considered the most persecuted refugees in the world. How come the largest number of refugees are not reflected in the countries from which the largest number of refugees are coming into India are not reflected? What the question really is, what is the logic of this law? And it doesn't seem to have anything to do with any current trend of refugees in India.
Okay. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Omar Ahmad, India political analyst, consultant, writer, journalist, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks so much.